Okay, discussing modern mythology today puts a spotlight on two classic films from my era, right? We're talking about Juice and The Craft. Two films that look very different, that are actually cut from exactly the same cloth, at least in a mythic sense. These are just different venues, right? Juice swapped the corner crews for a coven and guns for candles. But both these movies are really about marginalized teens who are craving control in a world that seems to ignore them. This is about power as identity, either I've got the juice or I can fly. It talks about friend groups, the hierarchy and the betrayal that often goes on within these groups, and the cost of power when ego starts to take over the will. Now, the biggest difference that we see is obviously the aesthetic filter. Juice is urban realism, it's street philosophy, it's raw consequences. The Craft is hot topic mysticism, right? It's candlelight rage, it's eyeliner as armor, but both tell a definitive story. Now, first we're going to start with Nancy and Bishop, and there's really no debate in how these two connect. Nancy is basically Bishop with Pentagram. She starts with insecurity, she touches power like he did with the gun, and he decides he'd rather have fear than respect. That's what he comes down. And this is a cautionary tale for anyone. It's a warning about power. It's just like Bishop. She sees that the system is wrong, how they're being treated, but they're both wrong about themselves becoming the monster. Now, the reason that The Craft hit so hard is because it gave gothic girls what Juice gave to young men. It's a mythic mirror, a power fantasy rooted in real emotional hunger, a warning wrapped in something cool enough to ignore. This wasn't about witchcraft, it was about control when you've never had any and what happens with that control. And this is why both these films have aged so well, and this is why they still get quoted. This is why every generation rediscovers and goes, wait, this is kind of dangerous, because they're discovering this same thing. Now, Nancy was the prototype female anti-hero, and the Coven was a failed revolution. So there's a lot that goes into exactly how this whole thing breaks out, right? But looking at each one of them, we can see their types even further. There's the catalyst character. In The Craft, it was Sarah. In Juice, it was Q. This is the one who's almost kind of more centered in the group, that can handle the actual responsibility of the power. Then there's the tyrant, who we kind of talked about, and that's Nancy and Bishop. They represent power without restraint. Then there's the followers, who are Bonnie and Rochelle, and they kind of represent Raheem and Steele. They're both kind of validation seekers, although I felt like Raheem was still more of a leader, but that got suppressed right off the bat. And the collapse is shown in one instance with the Coven, the other with the crew. And it's a brotherhood and sisterhood when they fail the test. And each of them opens up a lot of cracks. Now, the thing about Nancy and Bishop that stands out so ideally is that they were literally giving the same warning. Deep insecurities masks dominance, trauma weaponized into ideology, mistakes fear for leadership, confuses being seen with being obeyed. Now, Nancy and Bishop both fail this initiation test. In the myth, power is granted after humility is attained. They grab it before identity stabilizes. So power doesn't free them, it just magnifies the wounds that they already have. And this is why both characters escalate so fast. They don't want power per se, they just want to never feel small again. And myth always punishes that. Now, Sarah Bailey and Q, and this is the most balanced characters out of it. These are the one who the myth allows to walk away. And the why is, well, they respect the cost of the power. They understand limits. They don't confuse dominance with their actual identity. Q walks away from Bishop's madness. Sarah walks away from the Coven itself. Not because they were weak, but because they both passed that test. And in mythic terms, power can be refused is a power that can be trusted. That's really how you have to work that. If we look at, Bonnie and Rochelle and their equivalent to Raheem and Steele, they're all kind of the satellites. These characters exist for one question. What happens when your self-worth depends on proximity to power? They didn't want control, they wanted relief. Bonnie wanted beauty, Rochelle wanted revenge, Raheem wanted belonging, and Steele was desperately seeking that validation. So they both orbit the tyrant. And myth punishes them less severely, at least for less severely than Nancy and Bishop, but it never rewards them. They survive, but they're all kind of hollowed out at the end. And if we look at the coven and its equivalent to the crew, this failed brotherhood myth, they both are films that turn into tragedy. The brotherhood it exists to temper power, it's to check ego, it's to preserve balance. But in both films, loyalty replaces truth, that fear replaces counsel, and silence becomes the corrective tool. The reason that both these movies hit culturally is that Juice spoke directly to young men specifically who were denied agency. They talked about power being defined as respect and fear. We hear that throughout the film. The Craft spoke to young women who were denied autonomy, and power is framed in a spiritual and aesthetic way. But both are the same hunger. They're just speaking different languages. And both film functions as modern initiation myth for audiences who don't have real ones. They both end with the same lesson. Power doesn't make you whole. It only reveals what you already are. So just kind of an overview. The Craft isn't just Juice just for goth girls as a joke. It's Juice translated through feminine rage, through spiritual aesthetics, and social exclusion instead of street violence. It's the same myth, same failure, same warning. It just has better eyeliner. But again, looking at modern myth, we see these archetypes that are continuing in some of our favorite films, sometimes repeatedly within the same genre.